Hello, 7th graders. Your section for tomorrow is going to be section 1.6. It is on adding and subtracting rational numbers. Remember, we talked about a couple days ago rational numbers being ones that either repeat or come out even, and those can either be fractions or decimals. So first we're going to talk about decimals. When you add and subtract decimals, the rule is that you have to line up the decimals and then go ahead and add or subtract. So for example, if I had 4.25 minus 3.5, okay, written sideways, then I would go ahead and line it up, line up your decimals, and one's positive, one's negative, so I can go ahead and actually just subtract. If it bothers you to not have a number here, go ahead and put a 0 in. It's not going to change the answer. And I'm just going to go ahead and divide or subtract. So I get 0.75 for my answer. And the answer is positive because it's just regular subtraction. There's no negatives involved. If you did have a problem, let's say I used those same numbers, but I had a negative 4.25. and I was going to subtract 3.5. Keep in mind that that actually becomes adding a negative. Remember that subtracting is the same thing as adding a negative. So I would actually be adding these two because they're both negatives. Then I would get a bigger negative, negative 7.75 for my answer. So you need to be really careful with the negatives. So we are also going to be working with fractions, and we need to remember something about fractions. When you add and subtract fractions, you have to have common denominators. Remember that the denominator is the bottom number. So if I was going to subtract, let's say 4 7/8 minus 3 4/5, I like putting them up and down like this vertically. You can do it sideways if it makes sense to you. So you can see that I have an 1/8 here and a 1/5 here. I can't do the problem like that. So I can leave the whole numbers alone. And I'm just going to get new common denominator. So what number do both 8 and 5 go into? 40. So 8 goes into 40 5 times. So then you take 7 times 5 to get your new top number. 5 goes into 48 times. So 4 times 8 is 32. Now I can go ahead and subtract. 4 minus 3 is 1. 35 minus 32 is 3. 1 3/40. Again, you always need to make sure that you reduce. That one is reduced, so you can just leave it. That is the answer. Again, when you have positives and negatives, one positive, one negative, make sure that you know if you're really adding or if you're subtracting. It's the same rules for fractions as it is decimals. So now I'm going to show you another kind of problem that might come up, and I'm going to show you how to deal with it. So what if I am subtracting 2 1/7 minus 1 3/5? Okay, well, again, I need common denominators. So 7 and 5 would both go into 35, like so. So 7 goes into 35 5 times, which means I need to take 1 times 5. 5 times 35 is 7. 3 times 7 is 21. I can take 2 minus 1, but how do I take 21 from 5? 5 minus 21, that doesn't work. So I need to change it. I need to borrow. Okay? So I'm going to kick this number down to 1, and I'm going to borrow a whole number. How many 35ths am I borrowing if I borrow a whole number? It would be 35. So I take my 35 I borrowed plus my 5 that I had right here, and I would get 1 40 35ths. That's borrowing a whole number and adding what I already had. The bottom number I don't need to touch. I can just leave it alone. And now I can subtract. 1 minus 1 is 0, so I don't need to put anything. 40 minus 21 is 19 35ths. 19 is a prime number, so that is reduced right there. Got to be really careful on that kind of question. So bring this knowledge with you, and we will discuss it tomorrow.